Welcome back to the Blade Lab. Today what I have is a first impression of the Kunwu Padre knife, and in connection with that I've got a little bit of a rant and a little bit of a tip. So let's get on with it. So I just received this yesterday, so I'm not going to be able to give a sort of detailed review, but I can give you my first impressions, and they are quite positive. So what this knife is it's a titanium frame lock. It has a milled titanium pocket clip. More about that later. Get rid of this sticker, which is grabbing focus. It has obviously a diamond pattern textured pattern to be repetitive on the titanium scales. This actually does provide some pretty useful grip. It has a Damascus pivot collars, which add a little bit of color. They are, it seems like Kunwu, the Damascus they use is kind of a purpley dark Damascus, so it's not especially vibrant, but it does add a little bit of a pop to an otherwise pretty monochromatic knife. What else can we talk about? So we can see that it is it also has a titanium sort of geared, jimped back spacer. It has a little space for a lanyard, and all of the hardware on the knife is T8 hardware, which is awesome. Pretty sure, yeah. So let's open her up. Bang. So yeah, I think you can see the sort of obvious attraction to this knife. What I liked about it was two things really, because I have other Kunwu knives. I have a Pulsar that has the same textured titanium handles and other similar qualities, but I really like this blade shape, which we'll discuss in a moment. And I really like the DLC finish on the blade, which we will also discuss more in a moment. Before we get too far down the road, I know this has been talked about a lot in the past, but just to address the elephant in the room, this is the Custom Knife Factory Evo 3.0, and there's obvious similarities between the blades of the two knives. I'm not going to talk a lot about it. I'm just going to say, yeah, I think the blades are obviously quite similar. The handles I find are actually quite different, so I don't consider it to be a direct knockoff. But yeah, there's just no arguing that the blade is a derivative of the Evo, which is also a great knife and considerably more expensive. But there's a higher sort of level of quality overall to it that I think justifies the price difference, even though this knife is also very well manufactured by Kunwu. So that's that. So okay, we've just seen one deployment method, which was the the blade hole opening. It also has a sort of window blade pocket that's sort of a little bit bigger than the actual hole in the blade, which you can also use for reverse flicking. Reverse flick is excellent on this knife. The detent is stout. There's no two ways about that. It's you can pull it out, and it's quite a sturdy detent. So it snaps out with authority, which is also helped, of course, by the weight of the blade, which is not insubstantial. It also has this front flipper or / top flipper, which works very well indeed also. I can't quite, I could probably do the top flip if it wasn't a frame lock, but I can't get enough force on it without also pressing on the lock bar, so I can't do it that way. I can do the sort of finger over method, works very, very easily. Thumb flicking is possible, but not the most comfortable in the world. You sort of have to, you kind of do that sort of out thing rather than straight up. Well, actually, I guess you can go sort of straight up, but yeah, it's not ideal. So the best two opening methods with this would be the middle finger flick and the front flip, in my opinion. The action is good. It's drop shut, but in a sort of controlled drop. It's not an absolute guillotine. Acoustics are pretty good. It's a loud knife, as you can hear. You get a little bit of that sort of whoosh sound when it opens. I'll be quiet for a second. I think that's probably caused by the ceramic ball bearings. This is a bearing knife. Running against the DLC. Be interesting to see what happens with that over time. Because the DLC is very hard and the ceramic bearings are also very hard. I'm sure the bearings are probably, but I can't say for sure, harder than the DLC. So I'll be curious to see what sort of track, if any, the bearings wear into the DLC coating. We'll stop that for a second, stop driving you insane. So, yeah, what else can we say? Let me just, as you can see, this is a bit of a, the DLC, the polished DLC is a bit of a fingerprint magnet. I don't mind that. I think it's a great looking surface. The blade, I don't believe I have mentioned, should have, is Vanax steel. It's an interesting choice. I mean, obviously, all of the there are versions of this that do not have the DLC coating. Some of them are stonewashed. I think they might have a satin also. And Vanax, frankly, makes more sense for those versions because the best thing about Vanax is that it is extremely corrosion resistant, and so you don't necessarily need all that corrosion resistance when you're coating a blade in DLC. However, still a cool steel. Still, has decent edge retention, if not up to some of the tool steels. It also has decent toughness, but not quite up to some of the other steels like maybe 14C or 3V, but still pretty good. It's a similar steel to MagnaCut in a lot of ways. It achieves the same performance, but at a lower hardness level. I believe Kunwu is running the Vanax at around 60-61, which is where it's supposed to be. Can't get much harder than that. Kunwu pretty much always does a good job with their heat treats, and it's something that they, I think, take some care and pride in. So that's a great thing. I always have confidence in the steel when I buy a Kunwu knife. Ergonomically, it's a comfortable knife to hold. The handle is obviously sizable. My hands are, I have large glove-sized hands, pretty average, I think, for a male of our species. You can grab it on the lower section here, and there's plenty of room. It's comfortable. Cannot feel the clip biting into me. You can also choke up into this forward large finger choil here, and that's also quite comfortable if you want to, sort of get closer to whatever you're cutting and not. I find that when you choke up this way, you reduce the chances of whatever you're cutting, sort of getting caught in the choil up there, which can otherwise happen. So ergonomics are good. Weight on this, I believe, is around 4 ounces. Blade length is 3.5. Cutting edge somewhat less. I think it's probably about 3.25. Let me grab the tape measure just so we're not pulling numbers completely out of our ass. And let's see, so yeah, that's 3.25 there. Overall length is just about 8 inches. Handle length is about 4.75. So it's a full-size knife. Not huge, but full-size for sure. Let's do a couple comparisons, and in doing so, sort of transition to the next topic. So this is next to, whoops, move this down. This is a Spyderco Manix 2, and this is a Quiet Carry 9. So both a little bit smaller. Well, we've already seen the Evo 3.0. Evo 4s are smaller. I think each version has a slightly different size. So yeah, I think you get the idea. So let's now talk about these blade coatings. A pet peeve of mine is that a lot of, I don't know if it's a lot, but a number of knife manufacturers will refer to this sort of coating. I don't know if Spyderco is actually one of these. I'm just using this knife as a particular example, but a lot of knife companies will, when they describe the blade coating here, they will call it DLC. This is not DLC. This is not a DLC coating. This is a PVD coating, which is some sort of, well, they don't tell us specifically what it is, so we can't say. But PVD actually is not the coating. PVD is the process that's used to put the coating on the blade. So, a DLC blade is also PVD because the DLC is applied via PVD, which stands for, I believe, physical vapor deposition. So it's basically taking whatever the coating is from one form. In knives, I believe it's heat is used to vaporize it and then coat the blade. And it's by reason of that heat that sometimes coated knives can have lower hardness than uncoated knives, even if it's the same knife otherwise. And the reason for that is that they have to, because of the heat of the PVD process, they have to use a different tempering than they do for the regular one. So, and it may not be as ideal for the knife steel as the heat treat that they would normally apply. So they basically have to temper it at a higher temperature. So how can you tell the difference between these sort of like PVD blades and an actual DLC blade? Well, DLC is, even though it does darken the blade a little bit, it is translucent. So you're always going to see the underlying surface of the knife. So in this case, you can see at different angles that the underlying grind is a satin, and you can see that through the DLC coating. A strict PVD coating, on the other hand, is going to be opaque. No matter how you look at this, you're not going to be able to see the steel underneath unless you scrape the coating off. So why does it matter if one is DLC, actual DLC, and the other is not, whether there's just PVD? Well, glad you asked. DLC stands for diamond-like coating, and it's complicated. I've done a little bit of research on it, and there's apparently a variety of different DLCs. I think there's like 7 or so different varieties of it, and it's all, gets into chemistry, but the bottom line is that DLC is a very hard material when it's applied. So it's going to have an HRC well above the hardness of the actual blade, which makes it much more scratch resistant. So I believe the DLC used in knives, I'm not sure where I came up with this. I think I saw it on somebody else's channel, but I think it's in the upper 70s, if not even up to 80 or slightly above HRC, which is super, super hard. Even a steel like Maximet that's treated to the utmost is only going to be in the upper 60s in HRC. So it's very hard to scratch. Whereas, even though these sorts of PVD coatings are pretty tough, they are. I've tried to remove them, so I can tell you that it's not easy to scratch them, but they are not as tough. And the other aspect of it is that DLC is often used in industry, like the auto industry, space, whatnot, for its slickness. It's now I'm going to fingerprint the hell out of this, but it has a very low sort of drag coefficient. So when you put it on a blade, it's going to reduce the drag and sort of make your cutting easier. So that is another bonus to it. But mostly it's the scratch resistance. I'm not going to take a drill bit to this knife that I just received yesterday and paid for myself, but I've seen people do it. And even with a sort of a tungsten drill bit, it's going to be hard to scratch this DLC coating. Not so much the PVD coating. So, note to manufacturers, let's have some honesty in advertising. When you're using real DLC coating, call it DLC. When you're using just PVD that isn't DLC, don't call it DLC. Thank you. The next topic I wanted to talk about was pocket clips on textured titanium, and I guess this also applies to aluminum. Another pet peeve of mine is when you make a clip like this on a textured titanium scale and you don't leave an untextured patch underneath where the clip hits, because especially where you have these milled clips that often have very high retention, as this one does, what this is doing is when you put it in your pocket, it's basically squeezing the fabric of your pocket against this sort of washboard-like texture, and that is going to, one, make it harder to get in and out of your pocket, and two, it's eventually going to shred up your pocket material. And here's where my tip came in. So I've had this issue with other knives before, and it always irritates me because I tend to wear, I'm in Miami, I'm retired, so I wear shorts a lot of the time, and a lot of them have thick pocket material, and they get destroyed. And it's just hard to get the knives, more importantly for me, I don't really care if I have a little shredding on my pocket, because what am I doing? But it is a pain in the ass to have to be sort of tugging on your shorts to get your knife out, and it looks like you're trying to give yourself a wedgie or something. It's just embarrassing and humiliating. So not great. And so I've dealt with this in different ways before, right? And so one way you can try to deal with it is to just sort of, sorry, I think I just hit my microphone, but one way you can deal with it is just basically sort of bend the pocket clip back to the point where it's not squeezing so hard. Problem with that is that eventually it's going to stop making contact with the knife, and then when you touch the knife, it's going to make a sort of, this isn't doing it, but it's going to start making a tapping noise, which some people, including me, find a bit annoying. Not the end of the world, I'm living with that with some knives. So that's one way to deal with it. Another way you can deal with it is to actually sort of remove material underneath the clip, and I've tried to do that on a couple of occasions too, and I can't believe I hadn't thought of this before. I'm so stupid, because what I did was, try to mark or usually there is some, when you take the clip off, there is some mark there where the clip is making contact. And then what I've tried to do is use like a Dremel, with a little grinding bit and try to remove the texturing in the spot underneath where the clip makes contact with the fabric. It kind of makes sense, except if you've ever used a Dremel, you know that it's not the most controllable tool in the world, and sometimes you can be working away trying to remove a little material and it'll skip, and then you've screwed up your scale. Fortunately, I haven't done that, but it's just not ideal. And then it occurred to me when I was holding this knife, and again, slapping myself in the head for not having thought of this before. And maybe I'm sure other people have, and I just haven't seen it. But all you have to do is get a little bit of sandpaper. In this case, I'm not saying that this is the best way to do it, this particular sandpaper, but this is what I had on hand. This is just a 600 grit sort of used piece of wet dry sandpaper. Just tear off a little bit, and then just slide it under the pocket clip where it's making, and then just by nature of the fact that the clip is pressing against the scale, it's going to sand down that texture underneath the clip. And so I've done this a little bit for this one, and frankly I should probably start with a coarser grit than this and a fresher piece of sandpaper. But even just having done this for a few minutes with this relatively fine sandpaper that's a bit worn, it has actually improved the pocketability of this pocket clip quite a bit. And I don't know if I'll be able to see it. I think we'll just let's take off the clip real quick and just see what it looks like underneath there from having done that. So again, these are T8 screws. That'll come out in a moment. Get the other one. Okay, so let's see if we can see this. Let's wipe that off. I have no idea. I think if I hold it at an angle, I think you can see where it has softened for sure the texturing where the clip is coming in. It's not, it hasn't completely removed the texturing, but it has just taken sort of the sort of harsh points off of it, which weren't all that harsh to begin with, to be honest. But anyway, it has definitely improved the usability of the clip, and that is wonderful. So I'm just going to put this back on. There's actually a piece that goes all the way through to the other side on this particular screw, so I'm holding it in with my finger and also trying to prevent it from spinning around. And I tightened it a little bit too much. Right in the hole. So, yeah, I don't really need to do this for your elucidation, do I? But I will anyway, since I have the screwdriver right here. Okay, so by the way, I guess I didn't mention that it came perfectly centered. I should also mention that Kunwu always does a very nice, this isn't the factory edge, I always put my own edge on a new knife, but Kunwu actually, for a factory edge, does a very good job. It measured about 160, yeah, about 160 best. Sharper than myself, now it's about 80, so a lot sharper, but still 160 is good for a factory edge. Average is about 220. What else didn't I mention that I should have? Yes, it was relatively thin behind the edge at about 14 thousandths from the middle to the back. Towards the tip is actually thinner, which is a bit unusual. It was about 12 thousandths towards the tip. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I might come back, might not, and do a more in-depth review after I've had a chance to sort of use and carry this knife. but I don't suspect my opinion will change. Usually I've handled enough knives to know within a couple hours if I'm going to like a knife or not. Every now and then there's a outlier that either grows on me or repels me over time, but I think I'm going to like this one, and it's going to be a keeper. Thanks for stopping by. Please like the video if you liked it. Sign up for notifications, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.